Well, that takes us seamlessly to our very next speaker, because in crowded markets and skeptical times, credibility may be the single most important asset a brand possesses. Jonathan Gabay is a senior lecturer, consultant to global brands, journalist, author, and AI keynote speaker whose work helps organizations build stronger audience connections. With the keynote, Pause to Think and Excel. Here's Jonathan.
Hi. I've always liked Kit Kat, not just as someone who, had a weakness for chocolate, and believe me, I have a weakness for chocolate. Apparently, I'm not alone in all this stuff. I'm sure you've heard that Kit Kat was in the news recently after thieves made off with 413,793 packets of the stuff. And I guess that's either a criminal act or a level of brand devotion most marketers can only dream of. I never really thought of Kit Kat as one of those classic advertising examples speakers drag out to prove that they've scanned the right books. For me, it's the shape, it's the geometry, four fingers and a clean snap. And when I think about it, a chocolate bar built around the idea of pausing has always struck me as being elegantly intelligent. So I suppose you could take that as either a confession or a thesis statement. Well, probably both. Take a break, have a Kit Kat. I think it's one of those lines that really should not still be working. And yet, somehow it does. It survived trend, committees, rebrands, strategies, jargon, competitive campaigns from people of an organization that splashed out fortunes, all trying to sound far cleverer. So it's worth asking, why does it endure? I think the answer has very little to do with chocolate itself, but much more to do with the age in which we are living through right now. We live in a culture of constant output. Everything must be faster, more visible, more tailored, more optimized, more content in more formats. And if that sounds exhausting, I know it's because it is. People are tired. They're tired of noise. They're tired of doom. They're exhausted of being promised certainty from people who clearly don't deal with common everyday realities. In business, teams are stretched. Marketing is on a hamster wheel, churning out more and more material. And people don't even have the time to think about all this stuff. So when AI arrives, offering speed, scale, and fluency, quite naturally, people grab it. And why not? Used well, it's brilliant. It helps with ideas. It speeds up drafts. It reshapes material. It liberates nimble startups to produce work that once depended on heavier mammoths. Trained to manage it well, people use AI as a remarkable enabler, a new channel that actually enhances latent talent. However, used badly, it creates a particular type of danger. Not because, for instance, it writes badly. Quite frankly, it often writes really well. It illustrates brilliantly. If you're in video, it's fantastic. But there's a problem, and that is the problem. The problem is that its influency can, not influency, I beg your pardon, its fluency can shut down doubt. It doesn't allow for mistakes. A perfect paragraph looks like clarity. A confident image is mistaken for truth. And there again is the trap. What snares first is not intelligence, it's friction. Now, I'm not talking about friction in the distribution sense, but substance. And substance matters. It's the hurdle that, when ignored, makes relationships stumble, or when addressed, makes partnerships wiser. It's the pause where somebody says, hang on a minute, is this really us? Do we mean it? Would we stand by it if somebody challenged it publicly? And these aren't just technical questions, they're very human issues. They're questions that vanish when an organization becomes too concerned by speed, or conversely, incapacitated by fear. And in both cases, unimpressed by substance and, quite frankly, raw courage. Audiences, I think audiences, they're changing too. People are skeptical. They sense when something is overproduced. They might not be able to always pinpoint something in terms of why it feels off, but they know when things like language sounds generic. They spot when tone has no real weight behind it. And they certainly know when a leader or a brand, or indeed a political figure, is posting self-indulgence before thinking. And we've certainly seen a lot of that this week. Once that feeling takes hold, trust rarely collapses in one dramatic moment. Instead, what happens is it leaks quietly, gradually, and people stop listening. We're also, while all of this is going on, living through a fundamental change in how people, consumers, customers, discover you, brands. They meet you in fragments, a summary, an AI overview, a few seconds of TikTok, or via an algorithm stereotypical guess at what your organization appears to stand for. They are forming impressions before you've even properly introduced yourself. So the question is no longer whether you can produce more content. I think the question is whether your brand remains genuine, even when processed through systems designed to flatten everything into the same vanilla smooth flavor. Clearly, more output is not the answer, especially when output itself is easier to ignore. How about this? How about the answer being better judgment, better standards, better taste? In other words, the answer is the break. And that's why KitKat's slogan endures. It gets a simple truth that people don't just buy products, they seek permission, often from themselves, the permission to pause, the permission to step outside the pressure of uncertainty, permission to stop performing for at least 5 minutes and simply be recognized and respected as an individual again. That was true all those years back when the original slogan was written. And it's even more pertinent today, because today the pressure is not occasional. It is ambient. It sits in your pocket. It glows on your desk. It follows you into bed. It fills the silence. It squats in the gaps of your attention. We are scrolling through anxiety, outrage, and noise at an industrial scale. Everything feels urgent. Everyone is performing, whether for scraps, for the crowd, or for their own smartphone 48 megapixel reflection. Everyone is posting, they're reacting, but few are truly responding. Which is why, in this knee-jerk world of ours, a break is no longer just a convenience. I think it's an act of defiance. And that has real implications for brands, from startups to agile leaders who pause and then gain the confidence to move. For them, tools become enablers rather than substitutes for judgment. Credibility is not a bolt-on. It is not some shiny value on some marketing slide somewhere. Credibility happens when truth survives convenience. It is the refusal to make polished language something that is going to surpass honest communication. And all of this, all of it, the whole thing, it still depends on the vital human in the loop. And that's you. Someone willing to think. Ask the pain in the backside question. To notice when a brand is slipping from purpose into performance. Now, don't get me wrong. Whilst AI is brilliant in many absolute revolutionary ways, it doesn't actually care whether your message carries any real weight. Beyond published hard data, it can't know in the soft, kind of vulnerable human sense what your audience is wary of, wounded by, or quietly long for. That is again where you step in. It's why the old Kit Kat line still lands. It understands something that under today's pressures, it's so easy to forget. A pause is not empty. A pause is where meaning returns. It is where judgment catches up with fluency. It's where you stop reacting and start deciding. And so, yes, go ahead, use AI, use it intelligently, stretch your thinking, but don't outsource your passion. And before flooding the world with yet more frictionless, perfectly adequate, instantly forgettable slop, draw a breath, take a break. Thank you.